The following outline is provided as an overview of and topical guide to the U.S. state of Montana. Montana, fourth most extensive of the 50 states of the United States of America. Montana is the northernmost of the western mountain states. The territory of Montana joined the Union as the 41st state on November 8, 1889. General reference. Names. Common name, Montana. Pronunciation, Hypermeter and terrain. Official name, State of Montana. Abbreviations and name codes. Postal symbol, Mount ISO 3166-2 code. U.S. Mount Internet second level domain. Mount as nicknames. Big Sky Country. The last best place. Treasure State. Adjectival, Montana. Demonym, Montanan. Geography of Montana. Montana is a U.S. state, a federal state of the United States of America. Location: Northern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere, Americas, North America, Anglo-America, Northern America, United States of America, contiguous United States, Canada, U.S. border, Western United States, Mountain West United States, Northwestern United States. Population of Montana, 989,415. Area of Montana. Atlas of Montana. Places in Montana. Historic places in Montana. Ghost towns in Montana. National Historic Landmarks in Montana. National Register of Historic Places. Listings in Montana. Bridges on the National Register of Historic Places in Montana. National Natural Landmarks in Montana. National parks in Montana. State parks in Montana. Montana Dinosaur Trail. List of trails of Montana. List of oil fields of Montana. Environment of Montana. Climate of Montana. Protected areas in Montana. Forests in Montana. Superfund sites in Montana. Wildlife of Montana. Flora of Montana. Club mosses and mosses of Montana. Coniferous plants of Montana. Lichens of Montana. Monocotyledons of Montana. Dicotyledons of Montana. Fauna of Montana. Birds of Montana. Clams and mussels of Montana. Crustaceans of Montana. Mammals of Montana. Amphibians and reptiles of Montana. Fish of Montana. Snails and slugs of Montana. Natural geographic features of Montana. Forests in Montana. Islands of Montana. Lakes of Montana. Mountains of Montana. Rapids in Montana. Rivers of Montana. Mountain passes in Montana. Mountain passes in Montana. Waterfalls of Montana. Regions of Montana. Western Montana. Administrative divisions of Montana. Of the 56 counties of the state of Montana. Municipalities in Montana. Cities in Montana. State capital of Montana. Helena. Largest city in Montana. Billings City. Nicknames in Montana. Demography of Montana. Government and politics of Montana. Main article. Government of Montana and politics of Montana. Form of government. U.S. state government. United States congressional delegations from Montana. Montana state capital. Political party strength in Montana. Branches of the government of Montana. Executive branch of the government of Montana. Governor of Montana. Lieutenant Governor of Montana. Secretary of State of Montana. State Departments. Montana Department of Transportation. Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Legislative branch of the government of Montana. Montana State Legislature. Upper House, Montana Senate. Lower House, Montana House of Representatives. Judicial branch of the government of Montana. Supreme Court of Montana. Law and order in Montana. Law of Montana. Capital punishment in Montana. Individuals executed in Montana. Constitution of Montana. Crime in Montana. Gun laws in Montana. Law enforcement in Montana. Law enforcement agencies in Montana. Baldwin v. Fish and Game Commission of Montana. Military in Montana. Montana Air National Guard. Montana Army National Guard. Military installations. History of Montana. History of Montana. Timeline of pre-statehood Montana history. History of Montana by period. Indigenous peoples. English territory of Rupert's Land, 1670 to 1707. French colony of Louisiana east of Continental Divide, 1699 to 1764. Treaty of Fontainebleau of 1762. British territory of Rupert's Land, minus 1870. Spanish district of Alta Louisiana east of Continental Divide, 1764 to 1803. Third Treaty of San Ildefonso of 1800. French district of Haute Louisiana east of Continental Divide, 1803. Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Unorganized U.S. territory created by the Louisiana Purchase east of Continental Divide, 1803 to 1804. Lewis and Clark Expedition, 1804 to 1806. District of Louisiana east of Continental Divide, 1804 to 1805. Fur trade in Montana, 1806 to 1850. Territory of Louisiana east of Continental Divide, 1805 to 1812. Territory of Missouri east of Continental Divide, 1812 to 1821. War of 1812, June 18, 1812, March 23, 1815. Treaty of Ghent, December 24, 1814. Anglo-American Convention of 1818. Oregon Treaty of 1846. Mexican-American War, April 25, 1846, February 2, 1848. Territory of Oregon west of Continental Divide, 1848 to 1859. Territory of Washington west of Continental Divide, minus 1889. Territory of Nebraska east of Continental Divide, minus 1867. Territory of Dakota east of Continental Divide, minus 1889. Territory of Idaho, minus 1890. Territory of Montana, 1864 to 1889. Montana Pioneers Battle of the Little Bighorn, 1876. Nez Perce War, 1877. State of Montana becomes 41st state admitted to the United States of America on November 8, 1889. History of Montana. By region, by city. History of Anaconda. History of Billings. History of Butte. History of Choteau. History of Coal Strip. History of Columbia Falls. History of Conrad. History of Cut Bank. History of Deer Lodge. History of Dillon. History of East Helena. History of Forsyth. History of Fort Benton. History of Glasgow. History of Glendive. History of Great Falls. History of Hamilton. History of Hardin. History of Harlem. History of Harlowton. History of Havre. History of Helena. History of Kalispell. History of Laurel. History of Lewistown. History of Libby. History of Livingston. History of Malta. History of Miles City. History of Missoula. History of Plentywood. History of Polson. History of Poplar. History of Red Lodge. History of Renan. History of Roundup. History of Scobie. History of Shelby. History of Sydney. History of Thompson Falls. History of Three Forks. History of Townsend. History of Troy. History of Whitefish. History of White Sulphur Springs. History of Wolf Point. History of Montana. By subject: fur trade in Montana. Notable figures in Montana history. Territorial evolution of Montana. History publications about Montana. Bibliography of Montana history. Culture of Montana. Culture of Montana. Museums in Montana. Religion in Montana. Episcopal Diocese of Montana. Scouting in Montana. State symbols of Montana. Flag of the State of Montana. Great Seal of the State of Montana. The arts in Montana. Music of Montana. Sports in Montana. Economy and infrastructure of Montana. cemeteries in Montana, communications in Montana, newspapers in Montana, radio stations in Montana, television stations in Montana, healthcare in Montana, hospitals in Montana, manufacturing in Montana, Sims fishing products, transportation in Montana, airports in Montana, water in Montana, reservoirs in Montana, tunnels in Montana, education in Montana, schools in Montana, school districts in Montana, high schools in Montana, colleges and universities in Montana, University of Montana, Montana State University.